05:20 a.m. A muddy field in the Kursk gray zone. Russia's $85 million pride and joy, the Su-35 Flanker-E, sits helpless in the dirt, belly down like a wounded animal. The landing gear is crushed. The nose is caked with mud. The jet looks alive, but it's finished. And Ukrainian GUR special operators have a problem with a countdown. They have 20 minutes to pull a $50 million radar out of the aircraft's nose before the Russian Air Force arrives to erase the entire scene. If they succeed, they walk away with the Kremlin's most guarded cockpit secrets. If they fail, they die in the most expensive crossfire on Earth. Because this was never just a mechanical failure, it was a heist that started 2 hours earlier with a swarm of ghosts. And if you're wondering why Ukraine didn't go after another MiG this time, why they targeted an Su-35 instead, there's a reason that sounds like science fiction, but it's real enough to get people killed. The Su-35's radar is a masterpiece of engineering, but it runs on software with a very specific habit. Every time the system boots up, it sends a tiny encrypted handshake back to its home base, like an old computer calling home to confirm it's still authorized to exist. To Russian engineers, that's a security feature. To Ukrainian intelligence, it's a breadcrumb trail, not a flaw, a backdoor. And once you have a backdoor into the most protected fighter in the Russian arsenal, you stop thinking about shooting it down. You start thinking about stealing its brain. For 4 days, Ukrainian teams watched one particular Su-35 from the 105th Guards Division. They learned its fuel status, its maintenance rhythm, its launch windows, and most importantly, the exact moment it would be most vulnerable in the Kursk gray zone. But Kursk isn't a playground, it's a hornet's nest. The Russians have draped a steel umbrella over the region, S-400s, Pantsirs, layered radar coverage, packed so densely that anything with wings usually dies within seconds. It's an airspace designed to punish mistakes. If Ukraine only wanted a kill, they could have fired a missile and called it a day. But a charred pile of titanium tells you nothing. They wanted the brain, the Irbis-E radar, the encryption logic, the codes protecting the datalink that ties Russian fighters, radars, and command posts into a single nervous system. The plan wasn't a hard kill. It was a soft kill. Cripple the jet without destroying the nose. Force it down intact. Then rip out the radar before Russia can bury the evidence. But to pull that off, they had to lure a predator into a trap inside Russia's own air defense labyrinth. One wrong move, 1 second of hesitation, and the hunters become the hunted. That's where the new tactic comes in. New technology, new timing. A phantom maze the Su-35 would never forget. 4:30 a.m. 20 Ukrainian Lyut drones roar into the sky. Each one costs around $15,000. They're basically flying lawnmowers, rough, loud, simple, packed with explosives and pointed straight at the heart of Russia's energy infrastructure in Kursk. And inside a Russian command center, the steel umbrella begins to panic. 20 blips crawl across the monitors. Commanders are forced into a brutal choice: ignore the threat and watch fuel hubs burn, or spend $2 million S-400 interceptors on $15,000 fiberglass toys. Panic wins. Moscow demands heavy hitters. 2 Su-35 flankers tear off the Voronezh runway, dumping raw afterburner thrust into the dawn. To elite Russian pilots, this looks like a turkey shoot. Cheap drones, easy glory, quick kills. 6 minutes into the intercept, the first pilot brings up his OLS-35 infrared search and track. He doesn't even bother with a radar lock. He wants a quiet shot. An R-73 heat-seeker snaps off the rail at Mach 2.5. 5 seconds later, flash. A Lyut drone disappears in a thermal bloom, turning plastic and wiring into burning confetti. Target neutralized, the pilot chirps. Too easy. He banks hard, pulls high. G, lines up another. Second R-73, impact, second drone vaporized. On the ground, Russian officers are cheering. They should be checking their bank accounts. They just spent $4 million in missiles to erase $30,000 of drones. It's like using a Ferrari to crush 2 $10 skateboards. It works, but the math is suicidal. The pilots get cocky. They push deeper. They chase the remaining drones away from the protective bubble of ground-based air defenses, convinced they're winning the most expensive game of duck hunt ever played. What they don't realize is that every easy kill is pulling them further into a corridor Ukraine built specifically for them. And while they're busy shooting at cheap decoys, their own flight computers are being fed digital poison through a backdoor Ukraine discovered 96 hours earlier. One Su-35 commits to the pursuit. It crosses a line it should never cross, and the moment it does, the ambush begins. Here's the part that feels unfair. Shooting down those cheap lawnmowers becomes a death sentence for an $85 million jet, because the instant the Su-35 pilot fires, he does two things. First, he broadcasts his position, not in a dramatic radio call, in the physics of combat, radar emissions, missile plume signatures, datalink activity. Everything about an engagement lights up the battle space. And anyone listening within 100 miles now knows where the hunter is. Second, he locks himself into a pattern. Chase, engage, confirm, turn, repeat. A pattern that can be predicted, and that prediction is what Ukraine weaponizes. As the first loot drone detonates, 60 drones from a unit Ukrainian operators call Phantom Swarm 2.0 launch simultaneously from hidden thickets 10 miles away. 60. Not to attack, to lie. Imagine running through a hall of mirrors. You see enemies everywhere. You lunge and hit glass. That's what happens on the Su-35's radar screen. These drones aren't just flying. They carry AI processors. They coordinate. And using that digital backdoor, they know exactly what the Su-35 is scanning, what bands it's listening to, what patterns its radar expects. They don't simply jam the signal, they manipulate it. So on the pilot's display, he doesn't see 60 small drones. He sees 60 F-16 Vipers from every direction, high speed, hostile, closing at Mach 2. This is the wow moment. The pilot panics. He tries to lock a target at 12 o'clock. It vanishes and reappears at 6. He slams buttons, cycling modes, forcing reacquisitions, demanding solutions. But the Irbis-E radar, the $50 million crown jewel, starts spitting errors. Target lost. Reacquiring. Target lost. The most advanced Russian air superiority display suddenly looks like a broken television in a thunderstorm. And while the Su-35 chases ghosts and burns fuel, it misses the one threat that never shows itself. A whisper. 50 feet above the ground, a Ukrainian F-16 Viper, flying with its own radar completely dark. It's being guided by data, not emissions, fed from a Saab 340 AEW platform orbiting safely far away. Silent, patient, an assassin. At 40 miles, the Ukrainian pilot presses the pickle button. An AIM-120 leaves the rail. And here's the twist. This shot is not designed to turn the Su-35 into scrap metal. Ukraine doesn't want flames. They want the nose intact. So the missile is set to proximity fuse mode, not aimed at engines, not aimed at cockpit, aimed at empty air, just above the jet's spine. 3, 2, 1. The AIM-120 detonates 10 feet above the rear section. A cloud of tungsten shreds the horizontal stabilizers and slices through primary hydraulic lines in the stinger tail. In one instant, the invincible beast is paralyzed. It doesn't disintegrate. It becomes a high-speed glider. The pilot has about a heartbeat to understand what just happened before the aircraft starts falling like a stone with wings. He fights the controls. Nothing answers. He rides it down, and then mud. A brutal belly landing in a Kursk field. The fuselage scrapes like a 60-foot shock absorber grinding into the earth, but keeping the Irbis-E radar in the nose shockingly intact. The Russian pilot has 1.5 seconds to choose. He pulls the handles. The canopy blasts away. He's punched into the cold air under a white parachute, watching an $85 million career settle into the dirt. Now, the real war begins. Every radar operator within 200 miles sees the blip vanish. Moscow understands immediately what's at stake. They don't want recovery, they want deletion. At 5:22 a.m., the order comes down cold. Vaporize the wreckage. No survivors, no evidence. 2 Su-34 fullback bombers orbiting 60 miles away are vectored in. Their mission is simple. Drop guided bombs and turn that Su-35 into a crater before Ukraine can touch it. But the GUR team is already moving. Out of a tree line, like something from a heavy metal album cover, an M1070 heavy equipment transporter roars into view, an 8x8 beast built to haul 70-ton Abrams tanks through liquid mud, a 700-horsepower diesel engine, tires taller than a grown man, ruts deep enough to swallow a motorcycle. The truck doesn't stop so much as arrive. Technicians jump out while it's still rolling. They know a full Su-35 cannot be moved like this. The wings are too wide, the roads are too narrow, so they do something brutal and rehearsed. They attach linear-shaped charges along the wing roots. Controlled snap. The wings are severed cleanly. The frozen morning mud becomes a slick track. The M1070's dual winches scream, dragging the wingless fuselage onto the trailer. 15 tons of metal, sliding like a coffin across the earth. A heavy metal ballet practiced again and again on old Soviet frames until every movement is muscle memory. But the sky isn't waiting. Vampire! Vampire! The Ukrainian Saab 340 detects the Su-34's switching on designators and preparing another strike. The Russians launch Kh-29 missiles, each carrying a massive warhead, streaking in at Mach 2. This should be the end. But Ukraine didn't bring only a truck. They brought a shield you can't see. The remaining AI drones form a multi-band obscuration wall over the crash site, carbon fiber chaff, metallic aerosols, a gray curtain that attacks sensors, not people. Laser beams scatter uselessly. TV seekers see nothing but void. The missiles lose lock and overshoot. The shockwave shatters windows in a nearby farmhouse. But the Su-35 stays intact. The Su-34 pilots dive lower, furious, trying to get eyes on the target, and they fly straight into the Patriot trap. A Ukrainian Patriot battery hidden in the trees switches from standby to kill. Search mode is a lighthouse. Track mode is a spotlight. The Su-34's warning receiver screams. The pilot dumps chaff, yanks the jet hard, but it's too late. A PAC-3 interceptor launches at Mach 4. 15 seconds later, the sky over Kursk flashes with a $50 million fireball. One Su-34 is gone. On the ground, the M1070 driver is sweating through his vest. The Su-35 is finally secured on the trailer, sitting awkwardly, heavy, priceless. Don't drop it! Go, go, go! The transporter slams into gear, 18-speed transmission howling. It pulls the streamlined fuselage onto a paved road, moving at 45 miles per hour, fast for a rolling fortress, slow for a target. And Moscow throws everything it has. A swarm of Lancet loitering munitions launches from a nearby ridge, 10 of them, the scalpels of the Russian army, diving in at high speed, aiming for the transporter's engine block. But Ukrainian electronic warfare specialists flip on a frequency-hopping dome. Using real-time data sync, they create a dead zone around the convoy. Lancets enter the radius. Their video feeds turn to snow. Some go dumb and crash into the ruts. Others are forced off course. Handheld jammers finish a few more. Still, it's a 30-mile sprint to the border through a corridor of fire. Russian 152mm artillery starts bracketing the highway. Shells land closer, closer. Each impact throws shrapnel against the exposed airframe, like 1,000 hammers striking a bell. And inside the support cabin, while everything outside is chaos, a technician is doing something that feels almost insane. He has a fiber optic cable snaked into the Su-35's avionics bay. He isn't watching explosions. He's watching code. "I've got it," he whispers. The Irbis is still pinging. Because even in this damaged, dead state, the Su-35 is still trying to call home. A low-power maintenance beacon designed to help Russian technicians locate a lost aircraft. To the Russians, it's a rescue feature. To the GUR, it's a compass. As the M1070 crosses the final bridge into Ukrainian-held territory, Russia's Iskander ballistic missile finally arrives. Too late. The warhead vaporizes the bridge 45 seconds after the transporter clears it. The heist succeeds by a breath. The Su-35 rolls into a camouflaged hangar in Sumy region, battered, muddy, but intact where it matters. Now, the theft becomes an earthquake. Inside the hangar, cyber engineers isolate the radar in a Faraday cage, an environment that kills stray transmissions. Then they plug a fiber optic line straight into the maintenance port and build a man-in-the-middle bridge. The radar thinks it's talking to Russia. In reality, Ukraine is filtering every packet, and what they find is the holy grail of lazy engineering. That handshake behavior isn't a one-off. Every Su-35 in that division is programmed to periodically ping a central server at Voronezh for encrypted datalink updates. The ultimate irony: Russia's most advanced fighter has the digital loyalty of a stolen phone trying to find its owner. So instead of blocking the signal, the GUR builds a digital sandbox, a fake environment that convinces the Su-35 it's still parked on a Russian tarmac. The radar pings Voronezh. Voronezh pings back, and the trace is immediate. Within minutes, Ukraine isn't just looking at one jet. They are looking through the eyes of the base, a map of hangars, fuel depots, and the exact coordinates of other Su-35s in maintenance. Moscow didn't just lose an $85 million aircraft, they handed over a master key. Within 48 hours, Russia is forced to ground the flanker fleet in the region, because now their encrypted data link isn't a shield, it's a tracking beacon. That opens a 200-mile security hole across the Kursk front, forcing bombers to fly without escort or retreat deep into Russia. The steel umbrella folds, and the math of betrayal writes the final line. Russia spent years and billions building a Raptor killer, and it was captured by a 700-horsepower truck and clever code. Ukraine used a few $100,000 in drones and electronic deception to secure a $50 million radar and intelligence worth billions. So here's the question for the tactical minds at home. If you were the Ukrainian commander and you discovered this digital backdoor, what's your next move? Do you strike Voronezh immediately? Or do you stay quiet and listen to every Russian flight plan for the next month? Drop your choice in the comments. And if you want more Grand Theft Auto operations and the tech rewriting modern warfare, hit subscribe. Bye for now.